Welcome back to the Left, Labor Education for Today. This is another edition of the weekly rundown where we talk about the top stories from the world of work this week. And in our first story, I'll provide an update on the UAW after the union reached tentative agreements with all three Detroit auto manufacturers this week. The tentative agreements are now making their way through the ratification procedures where rank and file employees will have the opportunity to weigh in on these proposed contract enhancements, and they are being endorsed by union leadership all the way up to UAW President Shawn Fain. Once these agreements are ratified by the membership, the employees will be set to receive a host of new benefits throughout the term of this contract, which is now set to expire on April 30th, 2028. Among those benefits, employees can expect to receive about a 25% wage increase, again, over the life of the contract, which would be compounded to approximately 33% based on the estimated cost of living adjustments, which were also included in the contract negotiations by UAW and the Big Three during this negotiations phase. Those cost of living adjustments had been removed back in 2007. It was a major priority for UAW to bring them back on top of these historic wage increases. So about a total of 30 to 35% wage increases could probably be expected from now through the end of this next contract. As a corollary to these wage increases, employees are also going to see a higher starting rate as well as a faster path to the top rate once they do get started in one of these UAW represented job classifications. Of course, the UAW has been clear that there were more priorities on top of just wage increases, and so you did see additional contract enhancements for all three auto manufacturers, things like improvements to retiree benefits and payments to current retirees, as well as the coverage of non-union battery manufacturing plants under the UAW master agreement, and finally the right for current locations to strike over plant closures in the event any of the auto manufacturers decides to close a location during the term of the contract. They can still go on strike to voice their opposition to that business decision. Additionally, UAW President Shawn Fain was not shy about his strategy from here now that the legacy automaker negotiations have come to an end.
Part of our strength came from all three contracts expiring at once and taking on all three companies at once. But there's a lot more than three companies that we're looking to square up against. We need to organize like we've never organized before. We aren't bashful or quiet about what our plans are. Our goal is to spend the next few years organizing auto workers across this country. The Big Three aren't the only auto companies making record profits. Auto workers at Toyota, Honda, Volkswagen, Hyundai, and Tesla, they deserve record contracts too. And we're going to do everything we can to support them in the fight to win what they deserve.
Only days after the UAW inked tentative agreements with the Detroit Three, Toyota announced wage increases for its non-union U.S. factory workers, saying, "We value our employees and their contributions, and we show it by offering robust compensation packages that we continually review to ensure that we remain competitive within the automotive industry." So it seems like it did not take very long for the first domino to fall, but we'll have to watch and see what happens next, whether it is the non-union competition like Toyota, Tesla, Volkswagen, or the Detroit legacy auto manufacturers themselves and their ability to sustain profitability in light of these contract changes, whether it's the car prices and any impacts to consumers as a result of these negotiations, or the impact of wage inflation from such a large number of employees. There certainly is a lot to watch in the coming months and years. Next up, an update on Culinary Workers Local 226 out of Las Vegas. The last time I provided an update on this population, over 35,000 employees had taken to the streets as part of practice pickets, or really demonstrations that were short of an official work stoppage, to help build solidarity and support in the community as contract negotiations were not making much progress. And only a couple weeks since those demonstrations, the union has now officially announced a strike deadline of November 10th at 5 a.m. after they've been negotiating with MGM, Caesars, and Wynn for about 6 months now. The failure to come to any sufficient contract proposal has resulted in this strike deadline, after which employees would go on a work stoppage. That leaves about 6 or 7 days from the publishing of this video for the parties to come to an agreement.
It will be massive. It'll be the largest hospitality worker strike in the history of the U.S.
Union Secretary Treasurer Ted Papageorge has also telegraphed that workers would have access to a strike fund to help keep them afloat in the event of an actual work stoppage, although workers would need to spend a certain amount of time on the picket lines in order to qualify for that strike fund payment. And Las Vegas is really already a mess after spending several months preparing for the arrival of the Formula One Grand Prix, which is set for the weekend of November 16th. There's been construction, lane closures, landscaping modifications, and more. And so during a strike, 35,000 workers would be stationed across 18 properties on the Las Vegas Strip, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, pressuring locals and tourists alike to take their money elsewhere. Over 100,000 tourists are expected to come into the city for Formula One weekend. And so there is time to get a deal done before the strike deadline on November 10th. The parties have already agreed to meet several times between now and then to try to get this thing over the finish line. In our third story of the week, the Screen Actors Guild has reported a key update in their negotiations with the Association of Motion Picture and Television Producers. SAG-AFTRA union representing the actors has been on strike now for about 115 days as of the publishing of this video. And yesterday, Saturday, the union reported that they received an offer from the studios that was characterized by the studios as a last best and final offer. Although the details of this last best and final offer have not been made public, one anonymous source reported that it would include the highest wage increases in decades, along with revisions to proposals on key issues such as streaming residuals, artificial intelligence, and health and pension benefits. Interestingly, as a last best and final offer, the studios are signaling that the parties are drawing closer to an impasse, after which additional bargaining would prove futile. What the studios would decide from there is very much uncertain. However, one thing is clear is that the union would challenge that the parties have reached an impasse, which would bring the dispute before the National Labor Relations Board for resolution. Before we get ahead of ourselves, the union has reported that it is certainly carefully considering the proposal that has been passed by the studios in the context of the important proposals and concerns that have been raised at the bargaining table throughout these contentious negotiations. Next up, 3,700 public school employees in Portland, Oregon have gone on strike as of Wednesday of this week, citing concerns about overworking, classroom sizes, cost of living, and other issues. While teachers say they're going on strike for their own well-being as well as for the well-being of their students, Democratic Governor Tina Kotek says that a strike would not be in the best interest of students or their families. About 45,000 students are affected by the current work stoppages, which have closed about 81 schools in the Portland, Oregon area. I've relished my fair share of snow days growing up in New York, but I can only imagine what it would have been like to have a strike day, and I'm sure I would have loved that. Lastly, an important memo was issued by the NLRB General Counsel Jennifer Abruzzo this week. The subject of the memo was, quote, guidance in response to inquiries about the board's decision in Cemex Construction Materials Pacific LLC. I talked about this decision a couple times on the channel, and as a quick refresher, this decision introduced a new framework for union election procedures upon the submission of union authorization cards by a group of employees. Under this new framework, the company would be required to either voluntarily recognize the union, which has always been an option, or they would be required to file a petition for a union election with the National Labor Relations Board. This second part was new because it starts to put the onus on the employer as opposed to the employee or the union to file that election petition, and it provides a 2-week timeline requirement in order to do so. Third, even if the employer files that petition for a union election, if they commit any unfair labor practice that could potentially impact employees' ability to vote uncoerced in a free choice election, the board would set aside that election in favor of union support as shown by the submission of union authorization cards. In the memo, Abruzzo quotes from the Cemex decision saying, quote, representation delayed is often representation denied, and employees are harmed by delay when they must wait for their chosen representative to be able to bargain on their behalf. Therefore, through this memo, Abruzzo is making it very clear that employers are on thin ice when it comes to election procedures, especially in any situation where there could even be the perception that there is a delay in the effectuating of employees' free choice to choose or not choose a bargaining representative. Any delay would result in that remedial bargaining order a significant impact not only to the employer, but also to the affected group of employees. And that'll do it for this week's edition of the Weekly Rundown. Really some pretty important updates this week when you consider approaching the end of such significant contract negotiations in the UAW, the impact of a hospitality strike on the Las Vegas Strip, one of the tourist capitals of the country, one of the biggest events of the year happening in that location in the coming weeks. Also, the continuation of strife in the entertainment industry, which is having significant impacts on entertainment offerings, on streaming, on movie theaters, etc. But then also impacts to the public sector, where we see strikes in the Portland, Oregon school system, which really build on strikes from earlier in the year in Southern California that had similar expression of worker concerns. And then underpinned by the posture of the National Labor Relations Board, interpreting the recent CEMEX decision and the impact that that will have on employers and employees alike. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. Hope to see you again in the next one. Thanks and take care.